book, Testament. Da-da-da, and I think Janet still said I think so. This is one longer poem from the book Testament, and it talks about politics as well as women's issues. And I hope he's ready. I feel like a fool here. Because this one is actually titled "Quickly Washing Away Women's Rights," and it shows that I can read more, include stuff in this list, not just about the passing, overturning the Roe v. Wade. How are you doing there, John?
Wonderful.
It's called "Quickly Washing Away Women's Rights." After years of watching this international sport and being on a tennis team in school, I saw players from Russia whom have either moved to Monaco to live or were raised in the United States since childhood so they could be better athletes. And then I remember at least one Russian athlete then proudly walk with the Russian flag during the commencement parades for the Olympics, and this sickened me. For although I may not have been old enough to remember the Cold War, although I was never in school drills ducking and covering under my desk in case of a nuclear attack, I do remember hearing accounts of Soviet-born comrades searching for an escape route to the United States, fighting a U.S. citizen to marry, even changing her name, to then denounce her citizenship to claim Communist Soviet Socialist Republic, because those who have beliefs will do something when their government's gone wrong, and will no longer merely just stand by. So, yes, I do stand up and protest against your government, and when I see international athletes who proudly stand up for old Mother Russia, especially when they haven't lived there and don't know the Russian life themselves, I become infuriated. You may say, hey, the USSR no longer exists, stop living in the past. And I think people who don't know their own history are bound to repeat it. It doesn't matter if Nikita Khrushchev took over Stalin's dirty work, and people may say, no, Vladimir Putin is no Mikhail Gorbachev. He replaced Boris Yeltsin to herald a new day for the Soviet people. But just because they let some Western companies inside their borders to sell their wares, Putin is slowly turning his voting country into a good old dictatorship again. I watch history repeat itself as Russia invades the Ukraine, takes over the once decimated Chernobyl nuclear plant, leaving many scientists to wonder if their once regulated remains, now ignored, may cause another global disaster. Then Ukraine people fight like mad to keep their independence. Leaders from countries around the world provide arms to help them win this David versus Goliath battle. In all this, I see famous Russian tennis players, after winning a tournament, write peace in temporary neon marker on a lens of a video camera, poster recording their victory. Even countries hosting these international tournaments will not allow Russians to play under their country name. So, after what Russia is doing to a military conquest over another country, these athletes go so far as to write peace on a screen that will only be quickly washed away, erased, because that is probably the most they can do to show their protests to the actions of their mother Russia, to give well over half of their earnings to their Soviet socialist state while now living in Monaco. They protest by writing peace, and they think that's enough. And I think you've chosen to live yourself, to align yourself with this government that does this to its people. How dare you? It's easy to doctorate your way into philosophy and talk at great length about the injustices you see in the world, how high and mighty. I sit here and rail on about the evils of a government, while today, right now, I sit here in my little room with 4 walls, not unlike a jail cell, look out my small window pre-dawn before it becomes another 100+ degree day. And it's in a state where they're taking more of women's rights away. I sit here and I write, feel as if there is nothing I can do. As here in Texas, Texans who perform abortions, not the women, the victims of the injustices, but to the healthcare providers. They now face up to life in prison and a $100,000 fine for helping a woman in need. Texas is the largest state to restrict women's rights this way, now with 3 bans on the books. Wow, on the books, doing things by the books. That usually implies what's best for a person in accordance with the law, and not that their laws are so subjective that they hurt the people instead. These laws went into effect right before I went to sleep last night. I was wondering why my sleep seemed so senseless. But this long conglomeration of penalties not only combines a civil 6-figure fine, but also jail time, which is a violation to prosecute someone after they've been already fined. It faces a civil, i.e. money penalty. And no, I'm no lawyer, but my philosophy has remained on stable grounds for too long to not see the legal problems with these laws, if you don't see the moral problems. For Texans, check your premises and note that even in these causes of cases of prosecuting abortions, the woman becomes the victim, because it's never about a clump of cells. But the woman becomes the victim when you choose to press charges. She isn't given jail time. She isn't meant to pay money she doesn't have. But she is the one who suffers because of your laws that you claim are meant to protect. And it might not matter if 5 counties in Texas, including the one in which I live, would not press criminal charges for these offenses. I guess they just prefer fining people the 6 figures if they can afford it. The point is that more and more southern Bible Belt states that I still have to drive through to get to my true home up north are imposing these bans in the first place. You may question why I seem to be making such a big deal out of this. It's not like it directly affects me, but unreligious me can only think of the quote from a one-time anti-Semitic Nazi supporter, Pastor Martin Niemöller, who later was imprisoned in a concentration camp for speaking out against Nazi control of churches. Some of you may know this. First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I am not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. I think of the uproar I heard after Roe v. Wade was overturned, that 1 in 3 women have already lost abortion access, and more restrictive laws are coming from Texas up through Tennessee, all the way to Idaho, North and South Dakota. I even thought, even though the president's executive orders there to help women travel to less restrictive states for abortion was signed in early August, confusion still exists on both sides after this overturning and the combating began. Left-leaning judges block part of Idaho's abortion laws. Right-leaning judges block emergency abortion guidelines. So, I sit here in my metaphoric cell, spouting out about the injustices of the world, and then I think of the Russians I have land-based and wonder if I hold these same moral arguments up to myself. The worst things are happening to women in a state that I was forced to move to, so why don't I just leave? Well, maybe it's not as simple as I wish to claim it for be. Maybe things aren't as cut and dry as I always assume them to be. Writing passionately from my corner and never otherwise getting involved, but in these situations, if I'm stuck here and there's nothing I can do, it may be precisely because we're all stuck here. As I see protests from one state after another of women holding up signs saying, keep abortion legal. I've got a really long list of them, and I'm not going to give them all to you. Pregnancy begins with a penis. Regulate that. I'll scroll through. You want to cut off my rights? Can I cut off yours? I'm going through. Texas, where a virus has reproductive rights and a woman doesn't. Then the messages just keep getting louder and louder, longer and longer, but I'm not going to read them all to you. But if there are this many people who feel this strongly, this reassures me and makes me wonder if protests at times like this really do lead to change. And maybe just the right words from every person in every way that they can in this time can come from all, no matter how big or small, to get the repressive mentality out of the dark ages. None of us are sure just how we took this giant step backward, but I think we all agree it's time to move forward again.
Lengthy features, no pressure, but...
And no pressure, but...
And
if anybody's interested in the book, they're $20 each, and you'd have to be paying lots of shipping if you were getting it online anyway, and I've got it. I get it right now to you. I'm going to do this one because you liked this when I performed it on a Wednesday. You liked my accents when I did this one. So this was done at the poetry at the Gallery Cabaret just on Wednesday, and he appreciated my accents, and people who know periodic table stuff will probably get a kick out of it too. This is titled On a Sunday After a Sermon. On a Sunday after a sermon, services in some small town, wait, the town's not that small, maybe it's just small-minded, overheard conversations from 3 men in a restaurant after they attended church. Went something like this. I personally believe women are not as strong or intelligent as men. Some women may appear intelligent. Take Marie Curie as an example. She seems smart because she is said to have discovered radium, but really, she relied on her husband Philip and took most of the credit from him. This church-going man from that somehow small town also said something about the French not being that smart either. Fuming in my seat, I wanted to be able to strut over to his booth with, her husband's name was Pierre, and if it were Philip, it would have been Philippe. But he helped her, the woman who worked with Einstein. And after her husband died, she took over his professorship while still doing her work. She is actually the one who won the Nobel Prize. She moved to France to work, and the element she discovered is named after her home country. And this is when I remembered what a futile point it was to ever use reason or logic when religious men have sexism on their side. They've already made their closed minds up. What good would showing them the truth do? Saying the French aren't even as smart doesn't help this ignorant man's arguments when Marie Curie isn't even French, but at least the French are smart enough to strengthen women's reproductive rights choices after said religiously inclined men, where this ignorant man is from, opted to take those rights away from women after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. This is the battle every being faces now. Siding with reason and logic and common sense versus siding with a sexist religious dogma. It might be tough when you're raised to believe in a God and your intellect pushes the boundaries of your religious faith. But as I said, this is a battle when religiously stunted, small-minded men never check their premises and decide to live on unfounded conclusions, choosing to ignore the truth. These are the moments I hold my head in my hands and try to brainstorm over what my options are. I understand that this is a nation where we can't expect to be given rights unearned. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness means that we can work to earn what we deserve, but not to receive unearned gifts on a silver platter. But after we've had rights, that doesn't mean rights should be taken away. When religious leaders beyond my control change the law, this is why I hold my head in my hands while I still can and try to think my way out of this. Once again, check your premises. Women do have the brains for this. For it is now when I feel that as they take more rights away from over half the country, that metaphorically my hands are tied behind my back, I'm just wondering if they're going to offer to place a cigarette in my mouth and light it before the firing squad comes in and takes aim.
Of course it would be a Virginia Slim.
Virginia Slim.